financial security. As an unpaid caregiver, I've come to see how many structures and policies are built to depend upon the work that we do, and sort of just assume it. And most of us are women that are doing this work as well. So that is also an equity and a justice issue that I'm concerned with as well. And mostly as a mother, the biggest pain I have in my heart is seeing how the lack of these services is preventing my son from thriving, his ability to actually be able to live, work himself, and support himself in the world. He needs assistance to do that. So these issues are deeply personal for me and for the others we're going to hear from today on the call. So basically what we're going to do today is hear from others that it affects directly, present an overview of the workforce that we're talking about, and opportunities with the American Rescue Act, and then just open it up for some conversation, as well as hear about the federal attention we hope that these issues can receive. So I'd like to read our mission statement, particularly since you can't see the slide. Our policy group mission is the following. The Iowa Helping Community Policy Group's mission is to advance federal and state policies that recognize and support those in the helping fields, paid and unpaid, in their vital roles in society. Strengthening this workforce is core to reflecting Iowa values and policy, meeting the needs of Iowans, young and old and in between, rural and urban, advancing equity, and ensuring Iowa's prosperity. The composition of our group is fairly diverse. We have over 150 current members across the state, and we're growing. Some of us, yes, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Some of us became active as volunteers to promote attention to these issues during the presidential election. Okay. We represent frontline workers, child and family policy advocates, people receiving services, and persons from organizations and associations that represent these workers. And we're really focusing on these public policies that specifically strengthen this frontline workforce. And so we've been launching efforts to enlist a broad coalition of Iowa groups and leaders to educate policymakers and the public on these issues. So I'd like to turn it over so we can hear other stories. Let's begin with Alex Waters, and he can share his personal story with us as well. Alex?
Well, thank you so much. And similar to Tammy, I never anticipated just how dependent I would become upon this essential workforce. My story starts, actually, to give you a little bit of context, starts when I was 18. I actually had an accident where I broke my C5, C6 vertebrae and became a quadriplegic. I went on to do 6 months of rehabilitation, was actually able to go back to college, go to graduate school, do everything that I thought was right, to be able to get back on my feet, so to speak. I even had an internship in Washington, D.C., working for the U.S. Department of Ed before returning back to Northwest Iowa, living with my parents in Okoboji. I then moved to Sioux City, where I got gainfully employed, was able to get off of services for the most part, still utilizing Medicaid for the employed to be able to provide or have that care in the morning and in the evening. And like I said, became gainfully employed, was able to get off of some of those services. I've had a job working at my alma mater, Morningside College, for the last 7 years, and even saw an opportunity to give back to my community. I ran for city council, and I've held that position in the 4th largest city of Iowa since 2017. But the honest truth is that it's a struggle. It's really became apparent over the last couple of years that we have a dire situation when it comes to caregiving, because the company that I have, one of the only companies that allows or accepts Medicaid for reimbursement, is having such a difficult time attracting and retaining this workforce. They simply don't pay them enough to do the work that they're doing, to ask them to go from house to house, to do the labor of picking up. I mean, in the morning, it's early mornings to get me to work. As you know, whether it's with my politics or just getting to work at Morningside, it can be early mornings and later evenings. and throwing my 6'2" body around is a little difficult as well. So it's one of those things where I need those people in order to just get up and function and continue serving my community. And it's become such a dire situation that my mom actually had to stop working full time and start providing care. She now lives with me and has been providing care for over a year full time. And honestly, I am 34, so I look forward to the opportunity that I no longer have to live with my mom, even though I love her very dearly. And honestly, in order to do so, we just need to bolster our efforts around this caregiving community and see what we can collectively do and the impact we can make.
Thank you so much, Alex. Fran, Fran Mancy, could you share your story next?
Turn on your.
I think you're muted, Fran.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. My name is Fran Mansell. I have been a certified nursing assistant in Iowa for over 30 years. I realize that 90% of the direct care workforce is female. I am a male caregiver. I actually left a high school teaching career of 5 years before caregiving. I think it was just something that I felt I could use my talents in their field. As a direct caregiver, I was privileged to start off being hired to provide direct care to individuals with developmental physical disabilities. That was in a home community-based setting. And believe me, my most challenging experience that I recall was working with a 9-year-old autistic child. And I realized how valuable caregivers were. You cannot leave a special needs child without supportive direct care, continuous. And I had no specialized training in autism, so I struggled initially. I also then worked with elderly and long-term care. And I need to say that many of us in direct care love what we do. We do it because it's a real joy. We feel we can make such a positive impact and difference in the lives of some very, very vulnerable people. And families are so appreciative also of what we do for them. So I'm in direct caregiving because I love it. Over my 30 years, though, I would have to say and share that being able to retain and recruit direct care workers was a constant problem where I worked. I was a CNA mentor for 12 years. And so I had to orientate and train newly employed CNAs. And that turnover rate was usually around 60%. And I recall one year specifically in 2017, I believe it was, we went through 75 CNAs in a 9-month period. That's a high turnover. And many of us in direct care, like myself, if we would share our story and tell you why that is, we first off would say it's a physically challenging job, and at times it is very emotionally exhausting. And especially when you have to deal with the person who is actively dying on hospice, and now also with COVID-19, there's so much added stress to caregiving. When you work in the shadow of COVID-19, it takes a great deal of balance of having courage and also practicing caution so that you don't cause harm to yourself or take that to your family or cause harm to those you're serving. Also, one of the things I would say, it doesn't pay a living wage to meet all of our living expenses. And some of us, I think it's close to 30% of us, we have to work 2 jobs. I did that for 12 years. And many of us feel that this caregiving career also is not valued and respected based on the essential cares that we have to perform and are expected to perform. One of the additional concerns that was really important for me and to, I think, all direct caregivers in the state is that we really don't have a career ladder of any kind. We don't have continuing educational standards or credentials that are recognized by the state. And that it's credentials that each one of us can maintain no matter what setting that we choose to work in. So basically, I think what I would say is that when you don't have enough caregivers working and entering the field and staying in the field, that constant turnover, minimizing is individuals' dignity and respect that they deserve. We lose that. The share is I'm becoming more aware of. As direct caregivers with the presence of COVID, one of those things you become more aware of is that many of those you service with care and support, they depend on you for more than just doing tasks that they no longer can do for themselves. They depend on you so much for encouragement, inspiration. They depend on you to offer them hope and compassion. They really depend on you to give them comfort and to help build confidence in their spirit because they feel so isolated. And I think you seriously realize that you develop a trust, you develop that partnership. And when you lose that trust, caregiving stops. So it's very difficult to also offer physical and emotional support. It's very challenging. I just want to, and I think this committee, to individuals we serve and for the workers who take care of them.
Thank you. Thank you, Fran. And Barb, for your story as well.
Hi, I'm Barb Merrill. I have had a career in childcare, which is another one of our helping community workforces. Childcare varies greatly in home settings and center settings in rural and urban areas, but the thing that is the same everywhere is that the childcare workforce is the workforce behind all the other workforces. And in the same way that our caregivers who work with our folks with disabilities and our elderly are needed so that their family members can continue to work, such as Alex's mom. Our childcare workforce is essential for young families to be able to access so that they can go to work and support the economy. Traditionally, it's the lowest paid workforce. And our childcare providers in Iowa and across the country are dependent on public assistance. More than 50% of this workforce uses some other form of public assistance in order to maintain their families. My own personal story is that I worked in childcare after I was out of college and then moved from a direct care role into a teaching role and then on to an administration role. In 1980, when I got out of college, I was paid $4.50 an hour to work in direct care and childcare. And that was above minimum wage a bit at that time. But the interesting thing about that number is that when you adjust it for inflation, it should be over $15 an hour now. And our childcare workforce in Iowa is paid on average $9 to $10 an hour now. So in the past 40 years has not even kept up with inflation. And the very few of those folks have any form of benefits. So as Fran was just saying, there's huge amounts of turnover in the childcare workforce. There's very little stability, and families who depend on childcare have difficulty across our state finding it. And this is all because of the workforce. There's plenty of places to offer childcare. There's plenty of people willing to do childcare, but they can't support their own families on what they can earn in this field. And at the same time, parents can't afford to pay any more. We often depend on parent payments to support the cost of running a childcare program, whether it's in someone's home or in a childcare center or part of a big facility. And yet young families can't afford to pay more than $100, $200 a week that they're already paying in order to access childcare. And out of that money, childcare providers are still earning under $10 an hour. in order to support our economy and support this very important workforce, our group is working to raise the voices of childcare, as well as all the other kinds of helping communities. And we appreciate Congresswoman Axne's support in the past, and we're delighted that you're willing to have this conversation with us again and see what we can do to raise all of our helping workforces. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Barb. I'm going to turn it over now to Charles Bruner, who is the facilitator of our group, and he's going to talk about the helping community workforce.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Denise, for being on and for listening to us. As I was listening to this group, I was really thinking that this is on a par, I think, with the testimony that often occurs with respect to congressional hearings, and really telling the story and the need for attention at the federal level to this helping workforce. I'm just going to be very quick, and we have it in the materials we've sent to you, but this helping workforce is actually a very large part of our economy. 180,000 workers in health and human services and childcare, 12% of the overall workforce, and really are not just necessary, they're the workforce behind the workforce, but they're also part of what makes our economy go and grow. And when we underpay and compensate and value them, it has impacts on our economy. There are actually nearly 80,000 in those direct frontline workers, home health care aides, people working in nursing homes, childcare, people working in terms of providing community health work, which are paid wages that are well below the median, below $15 per hour, $30,000 per year, and 90% of those are women. And these also represent 9 of the 15 top job postings on iowaworks.gov. This is a field that is going to be growing, and Iowa has a particular need for it with our aging population and the high proportion of families where both parents in the household are working. And most of these rely upon some public investments and reimbursement. And they are employed, some are employed by the public sector directly, but most are employed in positions where the public sector and government does have to contribute in order to providing those supports. We really do see a new era of looking at this workforce going forward and making investments. And that's why we formed in the campaign to advance the 21st century caregiving and education workforce, and other efforts to improve caregiving in terms of direct care workers, child care workers, nurses, and other educators in the field, and people seeing this as really what got us through a lot of the COVID-19 pandemic's impact upon people, both medically and socially, has been this workforce being out there, helping with parent and individual stress and the disruption in people's lives. And now I think really is the time and opportunity to begin to make those investments. And they really are reflected to a significant degree in starting a foundation in the American Rescue Plan with the community health workforce, with the investments in childcare, building back, and the emphasis of building back better in terms of all of these systems. And we want to be both cheerleaders for this work and mobilizers for the community around why it's important, but also to make sure that the devil in the details does occur, and that it's not just providing these workers and having them out in the field, but it's really valuing them for the work they're doing and equipping them to do that work, which includes their compensation, the working conditions they have, their Bill of Rights, and so on. So we want to work with you and Representative Axne in terms of making sure that there is a focus and that this workforce is front and center to our responses to COVID-19. And also to really look at this as not just the paid workforce, which is essential, but also how that paid workforce supports the unpaid workforce of family, friends and neighbors and relatives who are providing this care, and provides them with their own support so that they can take on those important roles. So I wanted to give you that overview. It's in our the presentation, some of the data and the materials, and we have more that we can provide. But we really think that this is something that now has an opportunity for a federal spotlight and action starting with even the American Rescue Plan, but going on before that to have a permanent attention to it, because some of the things will go away with the pandemic. The need for vaccinations, the need for checks to keep people going, and unemployment compensation. But some of it will remain long after the pandemic. Will need to be for response to future pandemics and so on. And we'll need to respond simply to people who are out there who are facing because of the conditions in their household a need for that care and help.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'd like to introduce Di Finley, who's going to speak to us about federal roles and leadership that we're hoping to see on these issues. Di?
Good morning, Denise. Di Finley, I'm with Caregivers. You know, there are thousands of other stories like the ones you just heard from Barb and Alex and Fran and Tammy. And I know we don't have to tell you that what they describe warrants more federal attention. They and the direct care workers and family caregivers that they rely on, who rely on them, need your continued support. This workforce, and I know we've met with you before about direct care workers, but they have been in crisis long before COVID. And we met with you a couple years ago to talk about the direct care workforce and the crisis that they were in. So these nurse aides, home care aides, direct support professionals, and others in direct care, as some have already mentioned, they provide about 80% of the direct hands-on care to Iowans of all ages and abilities. As Fran said, or somebody said, most of them are women earning $13.80 an hour. 10% don't have healthcare coverage from any source. And so because of their circumstances, they rely, some of them, on public assistance programs. And now they find themselves at the epicenter of this pandemic in jobs in which they cannot physically distance because they can't bathe somebody or address someone from 6 feet away. And because of the nature of their jobs, they're at greater risk for contracting and also spreading the virus. And then when they do become ill or have to quarantine or isolate because they've been exposed to COVID, sadly, some of them are forced to do so without paid leave. So COVID has certainly exposed many of the systemic gaps and inequities that have gone unaddressed for far too long, like the wages and the lack of paid leave. And those of us on this call and part of this group, we're certainly concerned about the immediate needs, the protection, personal protection of the workers and the people that they serve. But there are also some really major systemic and policy issues that need to be addressed. Some of the laws and rules were written back in the day, over 40 years ago, when nursing homes were the only option. And we now have, we've come a long way since then. We have home care, assisted living, adult day services, community supports, but the laws, unfortunately, have not changed with the changes in the delivery system. So basically what we have is a very, just a fundamentally flawed system. And I can give you an example of that. In that with the direct care workforce, we tend to define them by the population they serve or the workplace setting. And that just ends up creating a very siloed and fragmented system, which becomes a burden to the worker and the people who rely on them. So first, we thank you for being out front on so many of these issues with the last COVID relief package and what you're doing in this area now, the work that you've done around childcare services. And moving forward, I think this, the Build Back Better plan does present some opportunities for the folks that we're talking about by investing $750 billion over the next 10 years to create more jobs, increase wages, and implement policies that will help bring stability to the paid and unpaid caregiver network. So collectively, I think we just ask that Representative Axne continue to be out front to support the new administration's plan, and specifically by directing resources toward this helping community, and to also ensure that with the next relief package, that those dollars are directed toward this the caregiving community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Di. We'd really like to just open it up to questions that you have for us and discussion.
Well, great. Hey, everybody, this is Denise. First, I just want to apologize. I have extra security settings on my computer because of my position, and I need administrative credentials to get around them, and they apparently expired last night, so I am not able to use my web camera. So I apologize that I'm joining you not face-to-face. The first thing I want to say is that, I am so appreciative for you guys being here. And, I would say my family is a part of your community. My mom was an unpaid caregiver for her mother, my grandmother, when she had dementia. And then again, when my grandfather was diagnosed with ALS. And my father is currently an unpaid caregiver for his mother, who has recently contracted COVID and is, in hospice and in a skilled living facility now. So, my family has had lots of caregivers around us and has served as caregivers. And so, we have so much love in our hearts for the volunteers and, the skilled nurses who are taking care of, my family. And, the Congresswoman has had a similar experience with her father as well. And so we are just very grateful for the work you do, paid and unpaid. And we couldn't agree more that we need more support for our caregivers. The Congresswoman has been supportive of increasing that federal minimum wage. Given that caregivers are some of the most important people in our society, caring for some of our most vulnerable, the idea that they have to, work at a wage that is substandard to, being able to afford an apartment or, make ends meet is just absurd. So we've all, the Congressman has always been a champion of that policy. And, next week, actually, we will be sending a letter to the Department of Veterans Affairs asking that the paid and unpaid caregivers to our veterans, get in line earlier than a general population so that they can receive a vaccine through the VA if they're caregivers to a veteran, because unfortunately, we know there's, we know there's a vaccine limitation, but we do think that those caregivers, need to be vaccinated. So I'm happy to send that letter over as soon as I can. We'll send it next week with Congressman Jeff Fortenberry out of Nebraska. So it's a bipartisan ask as well. And, the Congressman has been happy to support many of the pieces of legislation, that have passed. And we're obviously, looking towards what's going to happen with this American Rescue Plan. The Congresswoman just finished her markups of budget reconciliation this week. I think all told, it probably took 30 some odd hours between her two committees, but that is the first step in getting budget reconciliation completed so that we can begin, the process of passing something in the range of $2 trillion for support and recovery due to coronavirus. So we are happy to support caregivers. I'd love to know more about the specific bills or policies the Congresswoman can support I think we're doing a good job, but I'm always open to new ideas or anything we can do to make sure the Congresswoman is very active on that issue.
Thank you so much. I really just so much appreciate you speaking to us. Charles, did you want to?
Yeah, well, we'd love to, follow up and provide any support, certainly provide more specific information on some of the elements that we think are important to be stressed in the American Rescue Plan. As said, we think it has an opportunity for being transformational in terms of really improving our economy and society by making these long overdue investments. I would say, even just as one aspect, there is a call for 100,000 additional workers, community-based health workers who initially working in largely poor and disinvested urban and rural communities would be doing work around getting people vaccinated and educating people about what they can do to respond to COVID and helping them with their responses. And it's very important to do that. But long-term is looked as building a workforce out there that really does do that relational care. I think we're very supportive of that, but we also recognize that those workers, we think we can find people who do that work, but it's not the lowest person on the totem pole, interchangeable parts, plug in and play. There are skills, qualities, and supports that are needed to be effective. And that certainly getting it out fast is really important, but setting that foundation is doing it well. And Fran is just this wonderful caregiver, I think, and Alex's mom and the people that Tammy have. We know that there are attitudes, aptitudes, and then a support system that allows one to gain skills. Fran mentioned connecting up with, he had to learn about autism because he faced that. Well, you need a supporting system so you can do that. He needs that access to somebody who is an expert in autism. He needs his supervisor or the thing to say, wait a minute, we're going to step back, take some more time on this, do this. Well, I think that the qualities of that workforce need to be recognized in that legislation. And that's an example of something. I think there's 35 or 40 billion for childcare. And I think that that's absolutely crucial to building back better, but it's got to be structured in a way that it's not just the quantity and the availability, but it's the support so that that workforce can really be the provide developmentally appropriate care and support in a way that also engages and informs the families that they're serving and is, I kind of think in some ways family daycare homes really need to be your child's other mother. Well, that requires an approach to the work, an aptitude, and a skill set that needs to be continuously developed and reinforced. It can't be done on the cheap. And that's one example of something. Another is, that $775 billion 10-year investment in the caregiving and education workforce, which I think will be part of the condition of the state address, is not really focused as much in this COVID-19 package, but it is there. So we really want to make sure that quality dimension is included, and we want to make sure that the supports are available for the not only the caregivers, but the people they're providing care to and the unpaid caregivers that are doing this work. And, you know, I'm a former state legislator. So is Janet Adams, who's also on this call, and others. And I think that this is something that we've got to, you know, not keep as a best kept secret what we do, but get it out there that we are making this investment and we know and care about this workforce. And so anything that Congresswoman can do around helping us to make sure that this is a highlight. I mentioned, you know, doing a hearing or congressional hearing or doing something in Iowa that would really be a focal point with Cindy Axne there, I think is important, because I think that this is something that can be that needs a political backing and force behind it. And frankly, the workers like Fran, you know, if they see that this is given attention, if they see that this is being recognized, if it gets the public visibility, they're activated and more motivated. They're more encouraged by, you know, being recognized, and it's just really important to do. So I wanted to kind of put that out there as far as how Representative Axne can really be a voice or a champion for this, and particularly in Iowa, and in making it aware that this is in the legislation. Again, we see most of the attention on the important $1,400 checks and the unemployment compensation and some other features around direct vaccinations for COVID, but we really see the gem that should not be hidden in this work, the investment made in this helping workforce.
If I could just add one idea to what you're saying, Charles, which I think is so important. We talk about build back better. We recognize that a society can't function without a solid infrastructure, but we very rarely talk about the infrastructure of care that any community needs as its foundation. We've made this care invisible. And so our group is talking about making it visible and building back better an infrastructure of care.
Well, you know, I love the idea of doing an event in Iowa, and I, you know, would need to check with the congresswoman's schedule and everything. You know, I don't want to make any promises before I chat with her, but I certainly love the idea, and I would be happy to ask her, you know, what she might have in mind, and to use you guys as a resource to see, you know, if there is some type of event that we could put together to really talk about the issues with the congresswoman and caregivers, you know, in our state about, you know, the hardships that they've faced. And so I'm happy to chat with her and circle back with, you know, Charles, I have your email address specifically, but, you know, if I can follow up with you and the group to see if there are maybe some events or possibility of doing something back in Iowa to raise the issue and bring people together. You know, I appreciate such a large group today, but I know that there are so many folks out there that would, you know, that share this profession and share this work that we could probably bring in as well.
Well, that would be terrific. And we can make it as easy as possible for you to do, as obviously you kind of had a mini testimony from people here, and we could flesh it out, but you know, it's something where I think we can do a lot of the background work and certainly have you provide the direction and guidance you want on it. But I think that would be really great. And we're also talking with other members of the Iowa congressional delegation. So, but we really know Cindy's commitment here, and the fact that she provided support for us during the campaign stages in saying that this was something important to her is really would love to have her do that.
Excellent. So as soon as I have a chance to speak with the congresswoman, you know, I'm happy to bring it up with her and follow up with you guys to see what might work here.
Great. And then Denise, I think that we will probably get back to you with other information and use you as our point, unless you want somebody else on your staff around these caregiver issues. And when we have things that we see in legislation that is moving forward to and where it might be highlighted or tweaked, that we would be happy to do that. Really glad to see your releases on things like the community health center support, which is really critical. And to my mind, I'm a child advocate, although I'm also a senior advocate. I am a senior, but the disruptions and the stress that this is placed on children and families is profound. And kids, are, federally qualified health centers are finding increasingly, kids coming in with suicidal ideation, that they serve 12% of all kids in the country and 20% of all kids on Medicaid and more. And they serve their parents and their family members that they are having to respond to emotional, behavioral, and social concerns, which I've always had to respond to, but sort of those concerns in a new and more profound way. And that support to them and that funding for the community health centers is really important. But a lot of what's going to be played out and most effective is not the doctor or the nurse practitioner spending that half an hour or an hour of time and doing that check back with the family and doing the continuous care. That's not appropriate to their scope of practice. They need to provide a warm handoff to somebody who can take that time and energy. And that warm handoff really is to somebody who is providing the direct care and need to be supported in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the Congresswoman would agree with you 100%. And, she understands these issues both as, a parent and as the daughter of someone who, has been in this situation. And so, we really value the work that our caregivers do in Iowa. And, it is an unpaid labor often that is incredibly difficult. And, we've also heard stories from, for example, children whose parent, needed that caregiver but couldn't afford it. And so we've heard from, I think it was, mostly a group of children who were immigrants to the United States who were caring for their parents and therefore putting off, things like college or, moving out of the house. I know I heard that earlier, that it's just difficult to find that family separation when, someone is reliant on these services. So, I'd love to flesh this idea out more with the Congresswoman and circle back, because we've heard it from, you guys as sort of representing the caregiving community and also representing folks who need care. And we've heard it from, all types of caregivers across the age and, economic spectrum.
Well, and we also have gotten together and feeling like there's strength in numbers, and we support what the National Association of Social Workers is promoting, and we support what's going on with postpartum care and expansion of doulas and nurse midwives, and we support doing work within nursing homes to enhance this capacity, and we support childcare. We're trying to say, it's not pick one of those groups to do something for. It's really this whole group together it's a huge part of our economy and society, and it is that infrastructure care that every community needs, and it is the workforce behind the workforce. So we're trying to do something so that we make sure that it's not just parsed off into doing little bits of things for one of the groups that may come to somebody's attention, but to really look at it as a whole. And I think that as you can tell, and we've had a bunch of silent partners on this call who are also great spokespeople that, we could talk for hours about this, but we know we don't have that time. So we do want to have that follow up with you.
Great. Yeah, I just to reiterate, I need to speak with the Congresswoman to be able to promise you next steps, which I'm happy to do, and follow up with you guys when I know what works for the Congresswoman's schedule. I will just flag because of all. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I really just, again, thank you for speaking to us, and we look forward to hearing the next steps from you as you know them. Thank you.
And thank you guys so much for sharing your personal stories with me. It makes a huge difference, and I hold those stories very close and know that I am with you personally as my family's gone through these things as well. So I greatly appreciate the personal touch you put into this meeting.
Thank you. And have a nice day. And I'm not sure your location, but if it's in most of this country, just stay warm, I think is advice no matter where you're at today.
Definitely. Well, I'm in DC, which is a little warmer than Iowa. So you guys, stay warm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Well, I know people have to get going to other things, and but I thought that went well, and thank everybody for their comments. And I put in, as you see, I put a new slide, and I tried to get this, that I will get this out to you folks, but I really want to get the slide deck back out to Denise and then let her know who was on the call. So she knows that we have a lot of people who weren't able to be on the call who are participating and have been very active, but we also that there were 15 or so of us who were participating.
Great. Thank you so much. By the way, in your legislative experience, who do we complain to about the weather? Who can fix that for us? Or there's just no hope.
I'll tell you, legislators love to talk about the weather because that avoids their responsibility for doing anything. They can have a nice chat, and we do want to develop relationships with our legislators, members of Congress, and other people. And I think that's really important. It's great to have Denise tell her personal story, but we ultimately want to get beyond the weather to something else.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, can you put a dome over the state or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just tired.
Great. Well, thanks again for everybody, and we are gonna we'll do our debriefing on this tomorrow. Tammy won't be there, but I think that this gives us another thing to move forward, and we also have and really thanks to Jen and her work and leadership, we really do have, I think, a very good concurrent resolution that we can use as a base for other types of mobilization too. So thanks. And as you said, stay warm.
Mm-hmm.